18
Your
years
Honor,
later,
the evidence
a
clearly
millionaire
shows a pattern
froze
of
during his
deliberate
divorce
deception and
hearing.
financial
The
misconduct.
lawyer looked just like his ex, and the truth shocked everyone. Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty cover you with his light. Fill your days with joy, your nights with peace, and your hearts with love that heals every wound. May every step be guided, every trial give strength, and every tear turn into joy. Amen. If you are here, comment present. If your heart feels this bond, comment, I am with Mr. Peter. Every story I share is not just words. It is my soul, my faith, and my sleepless labor, all for you. When you leave before the end, it hurts me deeply, as if my devotion is unseen. Please, stay until the last second. Every moment is for you. And to my new family, if doubt comes, ask those who've been here from the start. They know my truth, my loyalty, and the love I pour into every story. Your love keeps this family alive. Together we rise stronger, united in love and faith, forever blessed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every like and comment is a heartbeat that keeps this family alive. The sound of a baby's first cry should have brought Julian Hawthorne to his knees in gratitude, but instead it sent him walking toward the exit, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the hospital floor like a countdown to abandonment. Mr. Hawthorne, wait! The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes that had seen too many birthdays and too many deaths, chased after him down the sterile corridor of St. Mary's Hospital. Your wife needs you. There have been complications. Julian stopped but didn't turn around. His shoulders, broad and imposing in his $5,000 suit, remained rigid as marble. Is it a boy? The nurse's silence stretched between them like a taut wire. It's a beautiful, healthy girl, Mr. Hawthorne. She has your eyes. Those last 4 words would haunt Julian for the next 22 years, though he wouldn't know it yet. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a black credit card, and handed it to the nurse without looking at her. Make sure they have the best room. I have business to attend to. Sir, your wife is hemorrhaging. She needs to sign the papers my lawyer will bring tomorrow. Julian's voice was as cold as the December wind rattling the hospital windows. Tell her she has 48 hours to vacate the house. Inside room 307, Folisade Hawthorne lay in a pool of her own blood and tears, her body trembling not from the cold, but from the 18-hour labor that had nearly killed her. The baby girl in her arms was quiet now, unusual for a newborn, her dark eyes wide open and seeming to understand that she had been born into a world that had already rejected her. Folisade, you need a transfusion immediately, doctor. Carter said, his voice urgent but gentle. He had delivered hundreds of babies, but something about this scene, the missing father, the dying mother, the alert infant, made his hands shake as he prepared the consent forms. Where is your husband? We need his signature as next of kin. Folisade's sister, a Daisy, burst through the door just then, her nursing scrubs still damp with snow. She had driven 90 miles through a blizzard after getting her sister's desperate call. I'll sign whatever you need. I'm her family now. As the medical team rushed to save Folisade's life, Adaeze held her niece for the first time. The baby didn't cry, didn't fuss. She simply stared with those impossibly aware eyes, as if she was already calculating the cost of being born unwanted. What will you name her? Adaeze whispered to her sister, who was fading in and out of consciousness. Zola, Folisade managed, her voice barely audible. It means productive in Zulu. She will build something from these ashes. Across town, in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park, Julian popped champagne with his pregnant mistress, Morgana. She was everything Folisade wasn't, blonde where Folisade was dark, calculating where Folisade was genuine, carrying a baby she swore was a boy where Folisade had failed to deliver the heir Julian demanded. To our son, Morgana purred, raising her crystal flute. To the future Hawthorne heir. Julian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His mind wandered to his own father, the pharmaceutical titan who had built an empire on the backs of the desperate and sick. "Sons carry legacies," his father had told him. "Daughters carry other men's names." The next morning, while Folasade fought for her life in the ICU, Julian's lawyer, Bradley Stevenson, arrived with a stack of documents thick enough to build a wall, which, metaphorically, they would. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Bradley began, uncomfortable with the sight of the woman hooked to multiple machines. "Mr. Hawthorne has been more than generous. You'll receive $50,000 to relocate and establish yourself." Adaze snatched the papers before her sister could even attempt to reach for them. As a nurse, she had seen enough tragedy, but as a sister, she had never felt such rage. Generous. He's worth hundreds of millions, and he offers $50,000 to the woman who just gave him a child. "A child he didn't want," Bradley said quietly, immediately regretting his honesty. "Get out," Adaze said, her voice low and dangerous. "Get out before I forget my Hippocratic oath." But Folasade, gathering strength from some deep reservoir of dignity, stopped her. "I'll sign," she whispered, "but I want one thing added to the agreement." Bradley leaned in, eager to finish this distasteful business. "I want it in writing that he can never seek custody of Zola, ever, under any circumstances." "That's unusual. Mr. Hawthorne has no interest in—" "Put it in writing," Folasade insisted, her Nigerian accent thickening with emotion. "A man who walks away from his child's first cry will one day want to claim her first success. I know men like him. Put it in writing." Bradley nodded and made the addition. As Folasade signed her name with a shaking hand, baby Zola began to cry for the first time since birth. A sound so piercing, so full of infant fury, that everyone in the room stopped. "She knows," Adaze murmured. "Somehow she knows." What none of them knew was that 3 days before Zola's birth, while Folasade was in early labor, Julian had already emptied her inheritance accounts. $10 million left to her by her father, a Nigerian diplomat who had died just weeks before. Money that was meant to secure his daughter's future in America had been transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Julian had forged her signature on power of attorney documents while she was sedated during a false labor scare 2 weeks prior. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of pain and indignity. Folasade, barely able to walk, was wheeled out of the hospital's back entrance to avoid any media attention that might embarrass the Hawthorne name. Adaze had rented a small apartment in Brooklyn, far from the Manhattan mansion where Folasade had spent 3 years believing she was building a life with a man who loved her. As they drove away, Folasade looked back at the hospital where she had nearly died giving life, where her husband had chosen absence over presence, where her daughter had been deemed worthless before drawing her first breath. "We'll survive this," Adaze said, reaching over to squeeze her sister's hand. "We'll do more than survive," Folasade replied, looking down at Zola, who had finally fallen asleep. "We'll thrive, and one day he'll understand what he threw away." That same evening, Morgana moved into the Hawthorne mansion, her belongings filling the spaces where Folasade's had been, her laughter echoing in rooms that still held the ghost of another woman's tears. She had Julian's baby name already picked out, Asher, meaning blessed or happy one. But as she decorated the nursery in blues and silvers, she couldn't shake the image of the security footage she had watched earlier. Folasade being wheeled out of the hospital, holding a baby that looked exactly like Julian's mother in the old family portraits. Morgana touched her own swollen belly and felt the baby kick. "You'll be a boy," she whispered to her unborn child. "You have to be a boy." Because Morgana knew something Julian didn't. The baby she carried wasn't his. It belonged to Dimitri, her yoga instructor, a man with eyes as blue as the Mediterranean and a genealogy that could never produce a child with Hawthorne features. She had been careful, so careful, But sometimes fate has a way of planting seeds of destruction in the very foundations of our deceptions. 22 years from this night, these seeds would bloom into a reckoning that would destroy Julian Hawthorne more thoroughly than any business rival ever could. But tonight, he slept peacefully in his mansion, unaware that across the bridge in Brooklyn, a baby girl with his mother's eyes and his grandmother's birthmark was being sung to sleep with Nigerian lullabies, songs of warriors and queens who rose from nothing to reshape the world. Folasade's voice, weak but determined, carried through the thin walls of their new apartment. "Omomi, my child, you were born of abandonment, but you will not be abandoned. You were rejected by power, but you will become powerful. Sleep now, little Zola. Tomorrow, we begin to build." Chapter 2. The Gifted Child. 7-year-old Zola Hawthorne didn't play with dolls. She cross-examined them in mock trials she conducted in the corner of their Brooklyn apartment, using her mother's law textbooks as evidence. "Your Honor," she said to a teddy bear she'd positioned on a stack of books, her small voice carrying the authority of someone decades older, the defendant clearly violated the terms of custody when she abandoned her child. "I present Exhibit A." She held up a photograph she'd found hidden in her mother's drawer, a wedding photo of Folasade in a stunning white dress, standing next to a man whose face had been carefully cut out. Folasade, returning from her third job of the day, she cleaned offices at night, worked as a cashier by day, and catered on weekends, stopped in doorway, her body aching but her heart suddenly racing. "Zola, where did you find that?" "Discovery process," Zola replied matter-of-factly, a phrase she'd learned from the legal shows she watched instead of cartoons. "Who's the man with no face, Mama?" It was a question Folasade had dreaded for 7 years. She moved into the room, her discount store uniform rustling with exhaustion, and sat on their second-hand couch. "Someone who didn't deserve to keep his face in our memories." "Is he my father?" The directness of the question shouldn't have surprised Folasade. Zola had always been unnaturally perceptive. At 2, she had taught herself to read. At 4, she was doing multiplication. At 6, her teachers had recommended she skip several grades, but Folasade had resisted, wanting her daughter to have some semblance of a normal childhood. "Biology doesn't make someone a father, Zola. Presence does. Love does. Sacrifice does." Zola studied her mother with those intense eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone to the truth beneath. "He left because I was a girl, didn't he?" Folasade felt her breath catch. "How could you possibly—" "The neighbors talk. Mrs. Chen said she saw it in the papers years ago. Pharmaceutical heir Julian Hawthorne welcomes son. But the dates don't match. He left us in December and his son was born in March. The woman was already pregnant. The weight of her 7-year-old daughter's deduction skills would have been amusing if it weren't so heartbreaking." Folasade pulled Zola into her arms, feeling the child's rigid resistance before she finally melted into the embrace. "You are not less than anyone, Zola. You are extraordinary. Then why didn't he want me? Because some men are so afraid of extraordinary women that they run from them, even when they're just babies." That night, after Folasade had fallen asleep over her accounting textbooks, she was trying to get certified to find better work. Zola crept to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline glittering in the distance. Somewhere in those towers of light, her father lived with his real family. She had looked him up at the library, using the computers when the librarian wasn't watching. Julian Hawthorne, net worth $500 million, CEO of Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals, married to Morgana Hawthorne, father to Asher Hawthorne. Asher, her replacement, the boy who got to carry the name she was denied. The next day at school, Zola's teacher, Ms. Patterson, announced a special visitor. "Class, we have Judge Theodore Brennan here to talk about the justice system." Judge Brennan was in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen every variation of human cruelty and compassion from his bench. He had come to PS 158 as part of a community outreach program, expecting to give a simple talk about laws and courts. What he didn't expect was the small girl in the third row who raised her hand after every statement he made. "Judge Brennan, isn't it true that the statute of limitations can be extended in cases of deliberate concealment?" He blinked, surprised. Yes, that's correct. How did you... And in cases of financial fraud, if the crime is ongoing, doesn't each transaction constitute a new violation, essentially resetting the clock? The other second graders giggled, not understanding the words, but recognizing that Zola was being weird again. But Judge Brennan leaned forward, intrigued. "What's your name, young lady?" "Zola Hawthorne, Your Honor." Hawthorne. The name sparked something in his memory. "Stay after class, Miss Hawthorne. I'd like to speak with you." That afternoon, Judge Brennan watched in amazement as Zola explained her understanding of legal precedents she'd learned from reading her mother's old law textbooks, books Folisade had kept from her own abandoned dreams of becoming a lawyer before marriage to Julian had derailed everything. "Your mother is a lawyer." "No, sir. She cleans offices. But she was supposed to be one. Before what?" Zola's face closed off, a skill learned too young. Before life happened. Judge Brennan made a decision that would change everything. "Would you like to come to my courtroom, see real justice in action?" "Would I be allowed?" "As my special guest, and perhaps we could continue these discussions. You have a remarkable mind, Zola. It should be nurtured." That began a mentorship that would span years. Every Saturday, while other children played in parks, Zola sat in Judge Brennan's courtroom, absorbing everything. He started bringing her books, real law books, not the outdated ones her mother had. He taught her Latin legal terms, explained the nuances of constitutional law, showed her how justice was supposed to work. "Why are you helping me?" Zola asked one day when she was 10, her vocabulary and reasoning now indistinguishable from an adult's. "Because I recognize something in you," Judge Brennan replied, his voice thoughtful. "I've seen thousands of lawyers in my career, but I've rarely seen anyone with your instinctive understanding of justice. You don't just learn the law, you feel it. My mother says I was born angry. Anger can be a tool if properly directed. Tell me, what makes you angry?" Zola was quiet for a long moment, watching a custody case unfold in the courtroom below. A father was fighting for his children, tears streaming down his face as he described how much he loved them. "Fathers who can cry for children in public but can't stay for them in private," she finally said. Judge Brennan studied her carefully. He had suspected there was a story there, a wound that drove this child's fierce pursuit of legal knowledge. "The law can't heal all wounds, Zola, but it can balance scales." "Then I want to be the one holding the scales." By the time Zola was 12, she was competing in debate championships meant for high schoolers. She didn't just win, she demolished her opponents with logic so precise and arguments so bulletproof that judges often had to remind themselves they were scoring a child. It was at the state championship that everything accelerated. The topic was corporate responsibility in pharmaceutical pricing, a subject that made Zola's blood burn for reasons the judges couldn't know. Her opponent was a privileged 18-year-old from a Manhattan prep school who argued that market forces should determine drug prices. Zola's rebuttal was legendary. She cited specific cases of patients dying because they couldn't afford insulin, children suffering because cancer drugs were priced like luxury cars, elderly people choosing between medicine and food. But it was her closing that brought the room to silence. When we allow corporations to put profit over people, we're not just failing as a society, we're failing as humans. And somewhere, a CEO sleeps peacefully in his mansion while a mother watches her child suffer, unable to afford the medicine sitting in warehouses, marked up 5,000% for no reason other than greed. That CEO has a name, That mother has a name, that child has a name. Justice means making sure those names matter equally. She won, of course, but more importantly, a Harvard recruiter in the audience immediately flagged her file. At 15, Zola Hawthorne was accepted to Harvard University on a full scholarship. The night of her acceptance, Folisade wept for hours, not from sadness, but from a joy so profound it physically hurt. Her daughter, her baby girl, who had been deemed worthless before she could walk, was going to Harvard. "We need to celebrate," Ade said, having driven down from Boston where she now worked as a head nurse. "This is extraordinary." But Zola wasn't celebrating. She was at her computer, researching. She had found something in the Harvard alumni database, Julian Hawthorne, class of 1990. Her father's legacy would help open doors for other students, but not for her. She would kick down those doors herself. "Mama," she said, turning to Folisade, "did you know that Julian Hawthorne donates $1 million to Harvard every year?" Folisade's face went pale. "Zola, you cannot—" "I'm not going to contact him. I'm going to surpass him. And one day, when he realizes who I am, it will be too late for his regret to matter." As mother and daughter embraced in their small Brooklyn apartment, neither of them knew that across the city, Julian Hawthorne was reading a newspaper article about the youngest black woman ever admitted to Harvard. The photo was grainy, but something about the girl's eyes made him pause. He shook his head and turned the page, dismissing the moment of recognition. His son, Asher, was struggling at his expensive prep school, more interested in poetry than profit margins, more gentle than ambitious. Julian looked at his son's report card with disgust. Straight B's, no leadership positions, no killer instinct. "You're weak," he told Asher over dinner. "At your age, I was already planning my empire." Morgana, now showing the effects of 20 years of secret drinking and desperate Botox, laughed nervously. "He's artistic, Julian. That's valuable too. Art doesn't build legacies, sons do, and I'm starting to wonder if I even have a real son." The irony of his words would only become clear years later, but that night they hung in the air like a prophecy, while 20 miles away his real legacy was studying for her Harvard entrance exams, preparing to become the weapon that would destroy everything he had built on the foundation of her mother's tears. Chapter 3. The Mistress's Desperation. Morgana Hawthorne discovered her husband's infidelity the way all forgotten wives do, through a credit card statement he'd been too arrogant to hide, charges at lingerie boutiques in sizes she hadn't worn in 15 years. "Dimitri, I need to see you," she slurred into her phone, her third glass of Chablis making her tongue heavy. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and she was already drunk, standing in her walk-in closet that was bigger than most Brooklyn apartments, surrounded by designer clothes that couldn't hide the fact that she was 57 years old in a marriage that had been dead for at least 10 of its 22 years. "Morgana, we agreed." Dimitri's voice, still accented after all these years in America, carried a weariness that matched her own. "Not that. I need yoga. A private session." It was their old code, from back when they actually pretended the sessions were about fitness and not about her desperate need to feel wanted by someone, anyone, even the man who had fathered her son during a moment of weakness 23 years ago. But Dimitri had moved on. Married now, with legitimate children and a legitimate life. "I'm booked solid, Morgana. Try the studio." She slammed the call shut and hurled the phone into her vanity mirror, watching glass and metal erupt into glittering shards, each splinter a reflection of her broken existence. That was the moment Asher walked in, back from Columbia University for spring break, his kind face instantly shadowed with worry. "Mom?" What happened? The laugh rising in her throat was wild and bitter. Her son, not Julian's by blood, though the fool never realized, was the only truth she cherished, and even that was a masterful lie. Your father's screwing a child, she spat, too drunk to filter herself. 23, younger than you. Asher's expression didn't shift, which somehow cut deeper. I already know. Everyone does. It's all over those vile gossip blogs. Morgana collapsed onto her velvet stool, age pressing heavy on her shoulders. How long? This one? About 6 months. But there've been more. Too many. Mom, you have to... I have to what? Run. With what money? Everything is in his name. That cursed prenup. I was pregnant, desperate, and pathetically naive. Asher lowered himself beside her. This boy who carried Dimitri's striking Mediterranean features Julian had foolishly credited to Morgana's non-existent Italian ancestry. Mom, there's something important I've never told you. Her bleary eyes narrowed. I know about Dimitri. The words sliced through her fog like ice water. What are you saying? When I was 16, there was a school blood drive. I learned I'm type O, you're type A, Julian's type AB. It's impossible I'm his son. I've carried that knowledge for 6 brutal years. The room spun violently. Why didn't you? Because I knew what he did to his first family. Yes, I found out about them too. Zola Hawthorne. She's at Yale Law now. Did you know that? The daughter he abandoned is about to become everything he wanted me to be. Morgana's drunken haze began to sharpen into steel. How do you know about her? I hired a PI when I traced my real father. I needed to understand who Julian really was. His first wife, Folasade, wasn't some nobody he discarded. Her father was a powerful Nigerian diplomat with vast mineral rights. Julian stole $10 million from her while she was giving birth. 10 million, Morgana breathed. Their empire, their pharmaceutical fortune, everything had been seeded with stolen blood money. Mom, you need to divorce him now. And maybe reach out to Zola. Are you insane? Why would she ever help me? I'm the woman who... Because she's been hunting him for years. I follow her work. She's written 3 devastating papers on corporate fraud, all pointing to his company. Morgana rose, pacing, mind racing. 2 decades as the trophy wife, the replacement, the tarnished jewel. But she had leverage, passwords, documents, evidence. Get me her contact. Be careful, Mom. If Julian finds out, Julian's in his office right now, screwing his secretary on the desk I chose for him. He won't find out. That night, Morgana sat at her laptop, drafting and deleting emails to Zola Hawthorne. How do you reach out to the daughter of the woman whose ruin you helped cause? At last, she settled on brutal truth. Miss Hawthorne, you don't know me, but I know you. I am the mistake your father made after he abandoned your mother. Now he's discarding me. I hold evidence of financial crimes that can destroy him. I need a lawyer. You need justice. Perhaps we can help one another. Morgana Hawthorne. The reply came within the hour. Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm a student, not a lawyer, but I intern at Brennan and Associates. If you're serious about divorce, they're the best firm in New York. Ask for Gabriel Sterling and tell him I referred you. He'll know. Do not contact me again. Morgana smiled coldly, the first true smile in years. Zola, using her middle name to hide her bloodline. A brilliant move. The next day, she strode into Brennan and Associates in her sharp Chanel suit, Hermes bag heavy with flash drives. Gabriel Sterling himself, sleek and sharp-eyed, greeted her. Mrs. Hawthorne, Zola mentioned your case. She'll be assisting on research, though she won't be in court. She's still a student. She's here, in this office. She interns 3 days a week. Remarkable mind. She's already tracked your husband's finances back 25 years. A chill slid down Morgana's spine. The girl had been preparing for this moment. I need to meet her. That wouldn't be advisable. I know things about her mother, things she deserves to hear. Arrange it. Gabriel studied her long and hard, then reached for his phone. ZM, could you come to conference room 3? The door opened 2 minutes later and Morgana's breath caught. The young woman who entered was stunning. Folisade's dark beauty mixed with Julian's sharp features, creating something altogether more powerful than either parent. But it was her eyes that were devastating, cold, calculating, with an intelligence that seemed to strip you bare. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Zola said, her voice neutral. "You look like him," Morgana blurted out, immediately regretting it. "I look like my mother," Zola corrected. "You wanted to tell me something?" Morgana pulled out a folder from her bag. "Your mother's inheritance. Julian didn't just steal it. He's been collecting interest on it for 22 years. These are the account numbers, the shell companies, everything." Zola took the folder, her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what she was holding. "Why are you helping me?" "Because for 22 years, I've been living in your mother's house, sleeping in her bed, raising my son in the nursery meant for you. And every day, I've known I was living a life built on another woman's ruins. I told myself it was love, but it was just greed meeting greed. And now that he's discarding you, now I want him to lose everything, the way your mother did, the way you did." Zola studied her for a long moment. "He's going to fight dirty. Let him. My son, Asher, he's not Julian's biological child. When that comes out in court, he'll be destroyed," Zola finished. "His entire identity is built on having a male heir." "There's more," Morgana said, pulling out another drive. "Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals has been price-fixing insulin for years. The FBI has been sniffing around, but they need insider information. This drive has everything." Zola's eyes widened slightly, the first real emotion Morgana had seen from her. "This could mean federal charges." "That's the idea. You could be implicated. I'm 57 years old, drinking myself to death in a loveless marriage. Prison might be an improvement." For the first time, Zola smiled, a sharp, dangerous thing that transformed her face. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I think we're going to work together just fine." As Morgana left the building, she felt lighter than she had in years. She had just lit a fuse that would blow up everything, but sometimes destruction was the only path to freedom. Back in the office, Zola spread out the documents Morgana had provided. 22 years of evidence, meticulously gathered by a woman scorned. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, property deeds with forged signatures, tax documents that showed systematic fraud. "My God," Gabriel whispered, looking over her shoulder. "This is enough to destroy him completely," Zola finished. "The question is timing. Morgana files for divorce next week. He'll come in confident, thinking his prenup protects him. He won't know I'm involved until he walks into that courtroom. You can't appear as counsel. You're not barred yet." "I don't need to appear. I just need to be there. The moment he sees me, he'll know his past has come to collect." That night, Zola called her mother for their weekly check-in. Folisade, now a successful accountant with her own firm, built through years of night school and sacrifice, could hear something different in her daughter's voice. "What aren't you telling me, Zola?" "Mama, what would you do if you could face him? If you could make him answer for everything?" Folisade was quiet for a long moment. "I would want him to see what he threw away. To understand that his rejection didn't destroy us. It forged us into something stronger than he could ever be. What if I could make that happen? Zola, what are you planning?" "Justice, Mama. 22 years late, but justice nonetheless." Across the city, Julian Hawthorne was in his office. The 23-year-old model sprawled across his desk when his phone buzzed. A text from Morgana. "I want a divorce." He laughed, showing the girl the message. "My wife thinks she can divorce me. She signed a prenup that gives her nothing." But as he reached for his phone to call his lawyer, a strange feeling crept over him, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard a baby crying, saw a woman hemorrhaging on a hospital bed, felt the weight of papers being signed in blood and tears. He shook it off. The past was dead. He had made sure of that 22 years ago. He had no idea that the past had gone to Yale Law School, and it was coming for him with a briefcase full of evidence and a heart full of carefully cultivated rage. Chapter 4. The Hidden Architecture. Zola Hawthorne hadn't slept in 72 hours, and the law library at Yale had become her war room. Every surface covered with 22 years of financial forensics that told the story of an empire built on blood money. "You need to rest," Gabriel Sterling said, finding her at 3 a.m., surrounded by bankers' boxes that Morgana had delivered, records that Julian had been too arrogant to destroy, believing himself untouchable. "I'll rest when he's in handcuffs," Zola replied, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard, cross-referencing shell companies with offshore accounts. "Look at this, Gabriel. Every single property he owns, every patent, every acquisition, it all traces back to December 2002. The month you were born. The month he stole my mother's inheritance, $10 million in rare earth mineral rights from her father's Nigerian holdings. But here's what Morgana didn't know. Those rights are now worth $500 million. Gabriel whistled low. The tech boom, rare earth minerals for smartphones, electric cars. Every iPhone, every Tesla, every piece of modern technology requires these minerals. My grandfather knew their value before anyone else. He died 2 weeks before I was born, leaving everything to my mother, and while she was hemorrhaging in a hospital bed begging for her life, Julian was forging her signature on transfer documents. She pulled up a document on her screen, a power of attorney form dated December 15th, 2002. "Look at the signature. Now look at this, my mother's actual signature from her college documents." She overlaid them on the screen. Not even close. He didn't even try to make it convincing. He was that confident she'd never fight back. "The statute of limitations doesn't apply." Zola's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Financial fraud has a discovery rule. The clock doesn't start until the crime is discovered, but more importantly, he's been collecting profits from those mineral rights every single month for 22 years. Each payment is a new crime. The Nigerian government has been sending royalty checks to a shell company called Lagos Holdings, LLC. Guess who the sole owner is? Julian. And guess what Lagos was? Gabriel shook his head. My mother's birthplace. He named the company he used to steal from her after the city where she was born. The arrogance of it. She pulled up another screen, showing a complex web of transactions. But here's where it gets beautiful. Morgana, in her wine-soaked wanderings through Julian's home office, found something he definitely should have destroyed. The original mineral rights certificate. The actual document from the Nigerian government, with my grandfather's seal leaving everything to Folasade Adebayo, maiden name. That proves everything. It proves he knew about the inheritance, knew its value, and deliberately stole it. But wait, there's more. Zola's exhaustion was giving way to a manic energy that Gabriel recognized from his prosecutor days, the high of building an airtight case. Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals' first major patent, the one that launched the company into the Fortune 500, was filed in January 2003. The R&D costs, exactly $10 million. He used my mother's money to develop a diabetes drug that he now sells at a 5,000% markup to the very communities my mother came from. The FBI investigation Morgana mentioned, already underway. I've been feeding them information through my Yale clinic work for 2 years. They just didn't know the source of the original funding. Now they do. Gabriel sat down, overwhelmed by the scope of what his intern had uncovered. Zola, this is beyond divorce court. This is federal crime territory. That's the point. Morgana thinks she's hiring us for a divorce. Julian thinks he's fighting a prenup. But what they're actually walking into is the complete dismantling of everything he's built. You've planned this for years, since I was 7 years old and found my parents' wedding photo with his face cut out. Did you know he sent my mother $50,000 in the divorce? $50,000 for a woman whose inheritance he had just stolen, like throwing coins at a beggar after robbing their house. Her phone buzzed. A message from Asher. "Mum's drinking again. Dad knows about the divorce filing. He's hired Cromwell and Associates." Zola laughed. "Perfect. Thomas Cromwell. I destroyed him in moot court last year. He's still bitter about losing to a student." "They have unlimited resources, Zola. We need to be prepared for..." "For what? For them to investigate me? Let them. I've been ZM professionally since I started interning. My mother legally changed our last name to her maiden name, Adebayo, when I was 10. The only place I'm still Zola Hawthorne is on my birth certificate, which is sealed. They won't know who I am until I walk into that courtroom." She turned back to her computer, pulling up more files. "But just in case they try to play dirty, I have insurance. Every mistress Julian has had for the past decade, I have their contact information. Every bribe he's paid to FDA officials, I have the receipts. Every time he's cheated on his taxes, I have the forms. How did you..." "Judge Brennan taught me that justice isn't just about being right. It's about being prepared. For 15 years, he's been teaching me how to build cases. But my mother taught me something else: patience. The Igbo people have a saying, 'However long the night, dawn will break. My dawn is next week.'" Gabriel stood to leave, then paused. "Your mother doesn't know, does she? About your involvement? She knows I'm working on a big case. She doesn't know it's this. I want to protect her from any blowback until it's over." "And after?" "After, she gets everything she should have had. The money, the houses, the dignity, and Julian gets a federal prison cell." The next morning, Zola stood in Morgana's penthouse apartment, the same home that should have been her mother's, looking at family photos on the mantel. Pictures of Asher at various ages, the boy who got the life that should have been hers. She felt no anger toward him. He was as much a victim as she was. "Strange, isn't it?" Morgana said, entering with coffee. "You should have grown up here." "No," Zola replied. "I grew up exactly where I needed to. This place would have made me soft. Brooklyn made me sharp." Morgana studied her, this young woman who carried herself like a queen despite being raised in exile. "He has no idea what's coming, does he? He knows you're divorcing him. He knows you have a lawyer. What he doesn't know is that every document you've provided, every piece of evidence, has been building a federal case for 2 years. What he doesn't know is that the FBI raid is already scheduled. They're just waiting for the divorce hearing to establish probable cause publicly." "When?" "Tuesday, 9 a.m., courtroom 7, Judge Patricia Williams presiding." "Williams? She hates him. He tried to bribe her once." "I know." Zola's smile was cold. "I clerked for her last summer. She's been waiting for a chance to see him burn. And she knows who you are? She knows I'm ZM, a brilliant intern with a particular interest in financial fraud. She doesn't know I'm his daughter. That revelation is reserved for Julian alone." Morgana poured herself wine despite it being 10 a.m. "What do you need from me?" "Just show up. Look beautiful, look wronged. And when Julian sees me, don't react. Let him process it alone." "What about Asher?" "He'll testify via video link. He's in California for the week, conveniently establishing alibi for when the FBI raids happen. He doesn't need to be connected to this." Morgana nodded, then asked the question she'd been holding back. "Do you hate me?" Zola considered this. "You were 23, pregnant, and he was powerful. You took an opportunity. I don't hate you for surviving. I hate him for creating a situation where women had to choose between dignity and survival." "Your mother, is she happy?" "She's successful. She built an accounting firm that specifically helps women recover hidden assets in divorces. She's saved hundreds of women from what happened to her." "She sounds remarkable." "She is, And next week, she's going to walk into that courtroom and see the man who destroyed her life realize that his destruction came from the daughter he threw away. As Zola left the penthouse, she passed Julian in the lobby. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? She was just another young black woman in a building full of invisible service people. But she recognized him. The same cold eyes from the photos, the same cruel mouth, the same arrogant walk. "Excuse me," she said softly, stepping aside. He didn't even acknowledge her existence, stepping into the elevator without a word. "Tuesday," she whispered to his retreating back. "Tuesday, you'll see me." That night she called her mother. "Mama, I need you to come to New York on Tuesday." "Zola, what's happening?" "Justice, Mama. 22 years of justice. Will you come? Do you need me? I've always needed you, but on Tuesday, I need you to see something. I need you to see that every sacrifice you made, every tear you cried, every night you went hungry so I could eat, it all meant something. Zola, please, Mama, just come. Courtroom 7, 9 a.m. Wear your best dress." Folasade was quiet for a moment. "The blue one? From my promotion celebration?" "Perfect. You'll be perfect." As Zola hung up, she looked at the wall of evidence she'd built. 22 years of crimes, meticulously documented. In less than a week, Julian Hawthorne would walk into a courtroom thinking he was fighting for his money. He'd actually be fighting for his freedom, and he'd already lost. Chapter 5. The Courtroom Lightning. Julian Hawthorne entered courtroom 7 at 8:55 a.m. wearing a $10,000 Armani suit, flanked by 5 lawyers from Cromwell and Associates, their combined hourly rate enough to feed a small village for a year. "Gentlemen," he said to his legal team, his voice carrying the casual arrogance of a man who'd never lost anything that mattered. "This should take 30 minutes. Morgana signed a prenup. She gets the standard payout. $2 million, not a penny more." Thomas Cromwell, lead counsel, nodded obsequiously. "The prenuptial agreement is airtight, Mr. Hawthorne. Your wife's counsel, Gabriel Sterling, is good, but he can't void a contract that explicit." Julian's eyes swept the courtroom, landing on Morgana, who sat at the plaintiff's table wearing the diamond necklace he'd given her for their 10th anniversary, the same anniversary he'd spent in bed with his mistress. She looked older, harder, like expensive leather left too long in the sun. "Pathetic," he muttered, then froze. At the plaintiff's table, partially hidden behind Gabriel Sterling, sat a young woman with her head down, reviewing documents. Something about the way she held her pen, the set of her shoulders. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams," the bailiff announced. Judge Williams entered, her eyes immediately finding Julian with barely concealed contempt. He'd tried to bribe her once, 8 years ago, to overlook a patent violation. She'd reported him to the bar, but nothing had stuck. Men like Julian never stuck to anything except money. "Be seated," Judge Williams said. "This is the matter of Hawthorne versus Hawthorne, divorce proceedings with contested assets. Mr. Sterling, is your client ready to proceed?" Gabriel stood. "We are, Your Honor. However, we'd like to note for the record that this divorce proceeding has uncovered significant financial irregularities that extend beyond marital assets." "Objection," Cromwell shot up. "This is a divorce hearing, not a financial investigation." "Overruled," Judge Williams said smoothly. "Financial disclosure is fundamental to divorce proceedings. Continue, Mr. Sterling." "Thank you, Your Honor. We'd like to call our first witness, or rather, present our consulting expert on financial forensics. Ms. Z.M., please stand." The young woman at the plaintiff's table stood slowly, deliberately, and turned to face the courtroom. Julian's blood turned to ice water. The face looking back at him was his mother's face, his grandmother's face, but carved in dark beauty that could only have come from Folasade. The eyes were his eyes, cold and calculating, but filled with something he'd never possessed. Righteous fury. Morgana leaned over to whisper, loud enough for him to hear, Meet Zola Marie Hawthorne. Though I believe she goes by Adebayo now, your daughter, the one you left bleeding on a hospital floor." Julian's lawyer grabbed his arm as he started to rise. "Sir, what's happening?" But Julian couldn't speak. His throat had closed, his chest tight with a panic he hadn't felt since the day his father had discovered his first embezzlement at age 16. "Your Honor," Gabriel continued, "Ms. ZM has been consulting on this case due to her expertise in financial fraud, particularly in pharmaceutical companies. She's published extensively on the subject at Yale Law School." "Yale," Julian whispered, the word scraping his throat. "Objection." Cromwell stood again, his face red. "This is clearly a conflict of interest. If this woman is who Mrs. Hawthorne claims—" "I'm exactly who she claims," Zola spoke for the first time, her voice carrying across the courtroom like a blade. "I'm the daughter Julian Hawthorne abandoned 22 years ago. I'm also the lead researcher who uncovered evidence that Mr. Hawthorne built his pharmaceutical empire on stolen funds." "Your Honor, this is ambush tactics." "This is discovery, Mr. Cromwell," Judge Williams interrupted. "Rather interesting discovery. Ms. Adebayo, is it? You're not serving as counsel, correct?" "No, Your Honor. I'm not yet barred. I'm simply presenting financial evidence as a consultant. Mr. Sterling remains counsel of record." "Then I see no conflict. Proceed." Zola turned to the projection screen, clicking a remote. A document appeared, the original mineral rights certificate from the Nigerian government. This document, authenticated by the Nigerian embassy, shows that my grandfather, Ambassador Adebayo, left mineral rights worth $10 million to his daughter, Folasade Adebayo Hawthorne, in November 2002. These rights are now valued at $500 million. Julian found his voice. "That's a lie? Is it?" Zola clicked again. A forged power of attorney appeared. "This is the document you used to transfer those rights to yourself, Mr. Hawthorne. Would you like to explain how my mother signed this while she was unconscious from hemorrhaging, fighting for her life after giving birth to me?" The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. "Your Honor," Zola continued, "I have here sworn affidavits from the medical team who treated my mother that day. Dr. James Carter, Nurse Patricia Wong, and anesthesiologist Dr. Sarah Mitchell, all confirming that Folasade Hawthorne was either unconscious or heavily sedated on December 15, 2002, when this signature allegedly occurred." "This is ancient history," Cromwell sputtered. "The statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing fraud," Zola interrupted. "Every month for 22 years, Mr. Hawthorne has collected royalty checks from these mineral rights through a shell company called Lagos Holdings, LLC. Each check is a new act of fraud." She clicked again. Bank statements filled the screen, showing monthly deposits ranging from $500,000 to $2 million, depending on market prices. "These funds," Zola continued, "were then used to develop Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals' flagship diabetes drug, Insulex, which Mr. Hawthorne now sells at a 5,000% markup to the very communities my mother came from." Julian stood abruptly. "You can't prove any of this." "Can't I?" Zola turned to him, and for a moment father and daughter stared at each other across 22 years of absence. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you recognize this email?" On the screen appeared an email from Julian to his CFO, dated January 2003. "Transfer the Lagos funds to R&D immediately. We need to fast-track the diabetes drug. These Nigerian mineral rights are a goldmine, literally. Make sure Folasade never finds out. She's too stupid to understand what she lost anyway." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. "Your Honor," Gabriel stood, "we move to introduce evidence of systematic fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering spanning 2 decades. "Your Honor, we need time to review," Cromwell began. "You've had 22 years, Judge Williams said coldly. "Motion granted." That's when the courtroom doors opened and Folasade Adebayo walked in. She wore the blue dress from her promotion celebration, the one she'd bought with her own money, earned from her own firm, built from nothing but will and brilliance. Her head was high, her spine straight, and her eyes found Julian's immediately. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. In a way he had. The woman he'd discarded, who he'd assumed had crawled away to die in obscurity, stood before him radiating a dignity that his money had never been able to buy. "Mrs. Adebayo," Judge Williams said gently, recognizing her from the case files. "Please, take a seat." Folasade sat in the gallery, directly behind her daughter. Zola didn't turn, but her shoulders straightened, drawing strength from her mother's presence. "Your Honor," Zola continued, her voice stronger now, "I'd like to present evidence that speaks not just to financial fraud, but to a pattern of deliberate cruelty." She clicked the remote. A hospital bill appeared. "This is the bill for my mother's emergency treatment after giving birth. $18,000. Mr. Hawthorne, worth hundreds of millions at the time, paid exactly zero. My aunt, a nurse making $40,000 a year, took out a loan to pay it." Click. "This is the eviction notice my mother received 3 days after leaving the hospital. 48 hours to vacate, it says, while she could barely walk." Click. "This is the custody agreement Mr. Hawthorne insisted on, permanently relinquishing all parental rights to me. He was so disgusted by having a daughter that he legally disowned me before I could walk." Click. "And this is a photo from the society pages dated 1 week after my birth. Mr. Hawthorne at a charity gala, toasting his new wife and announcing the upcoming birth of his son." Julian's face had gone from red to white to grey. His lawyers were frantically whispering, shuffling papers, trying to find something, anything, to counter the onslaught. "But here's the most interesting piece of evidence," Zola said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you know what your son Asher's blood type is?" Julian's head snapped up. "What does that have to do with—" "It's type O, Mr. Hawthorne. You're type AB. Morgana is type A. It's genetically impossible for you to be Asher's father." The courtroom erupted. Morgana covered her face. Whether in shame or to hide her satisfaction, no one could tell. Julian stood, his chair crashing backward. "You lying—" "We have the DNA test results," Gabriel interrupted smoothly. "Asher took one voluntarily. He's known for 6 years. The son you stayed for, the heir you chose over your daughter, isn't even yours." Julian turned to Morgana, his face contorting with rage. "You whore!" "Mr. Hawthorne," Judge Williams banged her gavel, "you will control yourself in my courtroom." But Julian was beyond control. 22 years of carefully constructed identity were crumbling. The son he'd groomed, the heir he'd chosen over his own blood, was another man's child. The fortune he'd built was founded on theft. The daughter he'd discarded had become his destroyer. "Your Honor," Zola said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "I'd like to note for the record that we've provided all this evidence to the FBI. They're particularly interested in the price-fixing scheme for insulin that Mr. Hawthorne has been running for the past decade." As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened again. 2 FBI agents entered, their badges visible. "Julian Hawthorne," one announced, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act." As they cuffed him, Julian looked at Zola one last time. "You're just like me," he spat. "Cold, calculating, ruthless." Zola finally smiled. A real smile that transformed her face into something beautiful and terrible. "No, Mr. Hawthorne, I'm like my mother. The difference is, she survived you. I'm ending you." As the FBI led Julian away, the courtroom slowly emptied until only 3 women remained: Folasade, Zola, and Morgana. Morgana approached slowly, cautiously. "I'm sorry," she said to Folasade, "for everything." Folasade studied her for a long moment. "You were young. He was powerful. I don't forgive you, but I understand you." Morgana nodded and left, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor, a sound that would soon be replaced by more practical shoes when the money ran out. Mother and daughter stood facing each other. "You did this for me," Folasade said softly. "I did this for us," Zola corrected. "For every night you worked 3 jobs. For every birthday you made magical with dollar store decorations. For every time you told me I was worth everything when he said I was worth nothing." They embraced in the empty courtroom, 2 women who had been forged in the fire of abandonment and emerged as warriors. "What happens now?" Folasade asked. "Now you get your inheritance back. With interest and penalties, it's worth close to $1 billion. Now, Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals gets dismantled for antitrust violations. Now, insulin becomes affordable again. Now, Julian goes to federal prison. And you. I graduate from Yale next month. I take the bar exam, and then I make sure no woman ever goes through what you did." As they walked out of the courtroom together, arm in arm, the morning sun streaming through the windows seemed to light their path forward, a path they had carved from injustice, paved with perseverance, and illuminated by the perfect, patient fury of a daughter's love. Chapter 6. The paper trail bleeds. The second day of proceedings began with Julian absent, his bail set at $5 million that his frozen assets couldn't touch, leaving him to stew in federal holding while his empire hemorrhaged evidence onto the courtroom floor. Thomas Cromwell stood before Judge Williams, his usual composure cracked like cheap veneer. "Your Honor, given the unexpected developments, we request a continuance." "Denied," Judge Williams said flatly. "Your client initiated these divorce proceedings by responding to Mrs. Hawthorne's filing. We'll proceed with the financial disclosure. Mr. Sterling?" Gabriel stood, but it was Zola who commanded the room, arranging documents with the precision of a surgeon preparing instruments. She wore a simple black suit that had cost $40 at a Brooklyn thrift store, but she carried it like armor. "Your Honor," Gabriel began, "we'd like to present evidence of asset hiding that goes beyond simple fraud. This is systematic economic violence." Zola clicked her remote. The screen filled with a complex web of shell companies, each connected by thin red lines that looked like blood vessels. Over the past 22 years, Mr. Hawthorne has created 47 shell companies across 15 countries, each one designed to hide assets that rightfully belong to Folasade Adebayo. She clicked again. Lagos Holdings, LLC, stealing Nigerian mineral rights. Daughters Tears, Inc. Yes, he actually named one which holds the patents developed with stolen funds. And my personal favorite, Worthless Girl Enterprises, incorporated the day after I was born. The courtroom stirred with disgust. In the gallery, Folasade sat perfectly still, her dignity a rebuke to every humiliation. "But here's where Mr. Hawthorne got sloppy," Zola continued. "He used the same lawyer for all incorporations, Bradley Stevenson, who also happened to witness the forged signatures." "Objection!" Cromwell shouted. "Attorney-client privilege is void in cases of ongoing criminal conspiracy," Zola interrupted. "Crawford versus State of New York, 2019. Mr. Stevenson has already received immunity in exchange for testimony." The door opened, and Bradley Stevenson entered, looking like a man walking to his own execution. He'd aged badly in 22 years, his conscience finally catching up with his face. "Mr. Stevenson," Gabriel addressed him after he was sworn in, "do you recognize this document?" Bradley's hands shook as he took the power of attorney form. "Yes." "Did Folasade Hawthorne sign this?" "No." "Who did?" Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. "Julian. He signed it himself. said she was too sedated to understand what she was losing anyway, said black women didn't know how to handle money. The gallery erupted. Judge Williams had to bang her gavel repeatedly to restore order. "Mr. Stevenson," Zola took over the questioning, though technically she shouldn't have, but no one stopped her. "How many documents did you watch Mr. Hawthorne forge?" 17, maybe more. He had a stamp made of her signature. Zola produced a rubber stamp from evidence. This stamp? Yes. Found in Mr. Hawthorne's home safe, which Mrs. Morgana Hawthorne provided access to, Zola explained to the court. She turned back to Bradley. "Tell us about the insurance policies." Bradley went even paler. He took out life insurance policies on both Folisade and the baby, $1 million each. He was hoping they'd die from complications. When they survived, he was furious. Folisade made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Zola's hand clenched around her remote, the only sign of her rage. "Your Honor," Gabriel said, "we'd like to introduce evidence of attempted murder for insurance fraud." "That's a separate criminal matter," Judge Williams said, though her disgust was evident. "But noted for the record. Continue with the financial disclosures." Zola clicked to a new slide. "Let's talk about where the money went. Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals, founded January 2003, with exactly $10 million in startup capital. By 2005, it was worth $50 million. By 2010, $500 million. Current valuation, $2 billion. She turned to face the courtroom. "Every penny of that empire was built on money stolen from my mother while she bled on a hospital bed. But that's not the worst part." New slide. Photographs of people, elderly, sick, desperate. These are victims of Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals' price-fixing scheme. Insulin that costs $2 to produce, sold for $800 a vial. This is Margaret Chen, age 67, who died rationing her insulin because she couldn't afford it. This is Deshaun Williams, age 12, who went into diabetic coma when his family had to choose between rent and medicine. This is... Objection. Cromwell stood. Relevance? Mr. Hawthorne's wealth is directly relevant to the divorce settlement, Judge Williams said. Continue, Ms. Adebayo. This is Maria Santos, Zola continued, her voice steady despite the tears she was fighting. Age 34, mother of 3, who died last month because she couldn't afford insulin. She was from Lagos, Nigeria, the same city Mr. Hawthorne named his theft after. She let that sink in before continuing. The FBI has connected 17 deaths directly to Hawthorne's price-fixing. 17 people who died so he could afford another yacht, another mistress, another temple to his ego. Your Honor, a new voice spoke from the gallery. Everyone turned to see Asher Hawthorne, or rather Asher Demetriou, as he'd legally changed his name, standing in full military dress uniform. I'd like to testify, he said. Judge Williams looked surprised. Mr. Sterling. We'd like to call Asher Demetriou to the stand, Gabriel said quickly. Asher took the oath, his Mediterranean features, so clearly not Julian's, obvious to everyone now. He looked at Morgana with sadness, at Zola with respect, and at the empty defendant's chair with contempt. Mr. Demetriou, Gabriel began, you were raised as Julian Hawthorne's son. I was raised as his project, Asher corrected. From the time I could walk, I was groomed to be his heir. Except I was never good enough, not ruthless enough, not cruel enough. He used to make me read business books instead of children's stories, made me practice hostile takeover scenarios with my toys. When did you learn he wasn't your biological father? When I was 16, blood drive at school, but I think I always knew. He never looked at me with love, just disappointment that I wasn't the killer he wanted me to be. Tell us about the documents you found. Asher pulled out a flash drive. When I was 18, I hacked into his personal computer. I found everything. The theft, the fraud, the affairs. But also this, emails where he discussed his plan to divorce my mother once I turned 21 and inherited my trust fund from my grandfather. He was going to take that too. Morgana gasped from the plaintiff's table. There's more, Asher continued. He has a son, a biological son, with his secretary from 10 years ago. He's been paying her off, hiding the kid in New Jersey. The boy's name is Julian Jr. He's 10 years old. The courtroom exploded again. Even Zola looked shocked. This was news to her. So he got his son after all, Asher said bitterly. Another child he abandoned, just hidden better. Your Honor, Zola stood recovering quickly. We moved to add Julian Jr. as an interested party in the asset distribution. That child deserves support. His father will never provide from prison. So moved, Judge Williams agreed. Mr. Demetriou, Gabriel continued, is there anything else you'd like to tell the court? Asher looked directly at Zola. Just that I'm sorry for living the life that should have been yours, for benefiting from your mother's pain. I'm so sorry. Zola's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. You were a child. Children don't apologize for their parents' crimes. But I'm not a child anymore, Asher replied, which is why I'm donating my entire trust fund, $30 million, to the Folasade Adebayo Foundation for Single Mothers. Folasade stood abruptly, her hand over her heart. Young man, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Asher said firmly. It's the only clean money I have. Everything else is tainted with theft. As Asher left the stand, he stopped at Folasade's seat and did something unexpected. He knelt, taking her hands in his. You're the mother I wish I'd had, he whispered, loud enough for the court to hear. Strong enough to survive him. Brave enough to thrive without him. Your daughter is extraordinary because you are extraordinary. Folasade pulled him into an embrace, this boy who had lived her daughter's stolen life, and whispered something in Igbo that only Zola understood. You are forgiven, child. Go in peace. Your Honor, Gabriel said as Asher left, we have one more piece of evidence to present. Zola clicked her remote one final time. A video appeared, security footage from a hospital dated December 15th, 2002. This is from St. Mary's Hospital the day I was born, Zola explained. Watch the timestamp, 3:47 p.m. On the grainy footage, a younger Julian could be seen in the hospital parking lot, on his phone. The audio was unclear, but his gestures were animated, angry. Now watch this, Zola said. Same timestamp, different camera. The screen split. On the other side, Folasade was being rushed into emergency surgery, hemorrhaging, medical staff working frantically to save her life. At the exact moment my mother was dying, Zola said, her voice finally cracking with emotion. Julian Hawthorne was on the phone with his broker, transferring her money. We have the phone records. We have the transaction logs. While she bled, he stole. While she begged for her life, he counted his profit. She turned to Judge Williams, tears finally falling. Your Honor, we're not just asking for justice. We're asking for acknowledgement that what happened here was a crime against humanity. That a man who could watch a woman almost die giving birth to his child and think only of money is not a man at all. He's a monster, and monsters don't get to keep their treasures. Judge Williams was visibly moved. Ms. Adebayo, do you have a final statement? Zola wiped her tears, straightening. Yes, Your Honor. Julian Hawthorne built a $2 billion empire on $10 million of stolen money. By the principle of unjust enrichment, every penny of that empire belongs to my mother. But we're not asking for all of it. We're asking for half, $1 billion, to be placed in trust for the victims of his price-fixing, the families he destroyed, the children like me who were deemed worthless before they could prove their worth. And the other half? Prison won't take his money, but it will take his time. The other half should go to his biological son, Julian Jr., managed by a trust, until he's old enough to decide if he wants his father's blood money. Every child deserves a chance, even his. Judge Williams nodded slowly. I'll render my decision after reviewing all evidence. Court is adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, Zola finally turned to face her mother fully. You watched it all, Folasade said softly. The video? You watched me almost die? I watched you survive, Zola corrected. I watched you fight. I watched you refuse to let go, even when he had already let go. That's not weakness, Mama. That's the strength I inherited, the strength that brought us here. They stood together in the emptying courtroom, mother and daughter, survivor and avenger, the abandoned and the architect of justice. It's not over, Folasade said. No, Zola agreed, looking at the evidence still displayed on the screen. 22 years of crime documented in cold precision. But his part in our story is, everything else we write ourselves. Chapter 7. The Sun's Revelation. Asher Dimitriou stood at the window of his California apartment at 5 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the Pacific Ocean gold, his phone pressed to his ear as he prepared to detonate the final bomb in Julian Hawthorne's life. Are you ready? Zola's voice came through clear despite the distance, the 3-hour time difference, meaning she'd been up all night preparing. I've been ready for 6 years, Asher replied, his hand steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. Since the moment I found out my entire life was a lie. 3,000 miles away, in a federal holding cell, Julian Hawthorne sat on a metal bench, his $10,000 suit replaced with orange cotton, his hands that had signed million-dollar deals now cuffed in chains. The guards had given him one phone call, which he'd used to scream at Cromwell about appeals. He had no idea that his son, the boy he'd tried to forge into his own image, was about to deliver testimony that would bury him deeper than any prison. The video link connected at exactly 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Asher appeared on the courtroom screen in full military dress uniform, his medals gleaming, a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, honors earned in Afghanistan while trying to prove he was worth something to a man who wasn't even his father. State your name for the record, Gabriel Sterling said. Asher Dimitriou, formerly Asher Hawthorne. First Lieutenant, United States Army, 82nd Airborne Division. Judge Williams leaned forward. Lieutenant Dimitriou, you understand you're under oath? Yes, Your Honor. I've spent my entire life living under lies. I'm here to tell the truth. In the gallery, Morgana clutched a tissue, her perfectly made-up face finally showing cracks. She had begged Asher not to testify, but he had been firm. You chose your path, Mom. Let me choose mine. Lieutenant Dimitriou, Gabriel began, tell us about the blood drive. Asher's jaw tightened. October 15th, 2018. Exeter Academy was having a blood drive for hurricane victims. I was 16, wanted to help. They typed my blood, O negative. Universal donor, they said, rare and valuable. He paused, his eyes finding his mother through the screen. That night at dinner, Julian, I can't call him father anymore, was bragging about his rare blood type. A B positive, he said. The universal receiver. I can take from anyone, he said, but give to almost no one. Perfect for a CEO. He laughed. Mom laughed. I didn't understand why my stomach turned until I got to biology class the next week. What did you learn? That it was genetically impossible for an AB positive father and an A positive mother to have an O negative child. I confronted Mom that night. On screen, Morgana's sob was audible. What did she tell you? The truth, finally, that my biological father was her yoga instructor, Dimitri Castellanos, that she'd been pregnant when she met Julian, but he was so desperate for a son, she let him believe I was his. How did that make you feel? Asher's composure cracked slightly, relieved. God help me, I was relieved. It explained why he never loved me, why nothing I did was ever good enough. I wasn't broken. I just wasn't his. Tell us about the documents you found. Asher pulled out a tablet, sharing his screen with the court. After I learned the truth, I became obsessed with understanding who Julian really was. I hacked into his personal computer. He used his birthday as his password, the narcissist. I found everything. He clicked through files. Emails to his mistresses, 12 of them over 22 years. Financial records showing the theft from Folisade. But this is what made me realize he's not just cruel, he's evil. A document appeared on screen. This is a medical record from a private investigator. Julian had Folisade followed for 3 years after the divorce. He wanted to know if she was struggling, if she was suffering. There are photos of her working 3 jobs, notes about which food bank she visited, documentation of every humiliation. The courtroom was dead silent. He has a scrapbook, Asher continued, his voice thick with disgust. Photos of Folisade working as a cleaner, photos of young Zola in hand-me-down clothes. He kept them in his office safe, would look at them when he was angry, called it his victory album. Folisade made a sound from the gallery, not quite a gasp, more like the air being punched from her lungs. Zola's hand found her mother's, squeezing tight. There's more, Asher said. The biological son in New Jersey, Julian Jr. He visits him once a month, takes him to baseball games, teaches him about business, all the things he never did with me. But here's the sick part. He makes the boy call him Mr. Hawthorne. Won't let him use Dad. He wants a son, but can't even give that much of himself. Lieutenant Dimitriou, Judge Williams interrupted. Do you have documentation of this? Everything, Your Honor. Credit card receipts, photos, even recordings. Julian recorded himself giving the boy business lessons. Listen to this. An audio file played. Julian's voice, cold and instructional. Remember, Julian Jr., people are assets or liabilities. Your mother is a liability I have to manage. You're an asset I'm developing. Never confuse the two. The boy's voice, small and uncertain. What about love, Mr. Hawthorne? Love is what poor people call dependency. We don't need love. We need leverage. Someone in the gallery whispered, Monster. No one disagreed. Tell us about December 15th, 2002, Gabriel prompted. Asher's face darkened. I was born March 3rd, 2003, which means Mom was 6 months pregnant when Julian left his wife and newborn daughter. He knew she was pregnant. He chose a mistress's pregnancy over his actual child. How do you know he knew? Because I found the ultrasound photos in his files. Dated November 2002, my ultrasound, with a note in his handwriting, finally a son. He left Folisade because she gave him a daughter, but the sick joke is, the son he chose wasn't even his. Lieutenant, is there anything else you want the court to know? Asher looked directly into the camera, as if he could see through it to the federal holding cell where Julian sat. Yes, Julian Hawthorne didn't just steal money. He stole lives. He stole my mother's youth, using her as a trophy while loving nothing but himself. He stole Folisade's future, condemning her to poverty while he lived in luxury. He stole Zola's birthright, denying her a father because she was born female. He stole my identity, raising me as an heir to an empire built on blood. He paused, his military bearing evident in his straight spine, his steady voice. But here's what he didn't count on. Survivors survive. Folisade survived and raised a daughter who would become his reckoning. Mom survived, even if she pickled herself in wine to do it. I survived by finding my real father, who teaches kindergarten and calls me Mijo and loves me for who I am, not what I can become. And Zola, ... He looked at her through the screen. Zola didn't just survive. She became everything Julian wanted in a child: brilliant, ruthless when necessary, strategic, powerful. The universe has a sense of irony, giving him the perfect heir in the body of the daughter he threw away. "One last question," Gabriel said. Would you like to address Julian directly?" Asher's laugh was bitter. "He's had 22 years of my words, my attempts to please him, my desperate need for his approval. He gets nothing more from me, but I do have something for Zola." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small box. "Zola, this was Julian's grandmother's ring, the one he was supposed to give to his first daughter. He kept it in his safe, said no one was worthy of it. I took it the night I left for basic training. It belongs to you. It always belonged to you." Even through the video screen, the ring was stunning. An Art Deco piece with a rare blue diamond surrounded by smaller white stones. "It's worth about $2 million, Asher added, but its real value is that it represents 4 generations of Hawthorne women who built the foundation Julian stands on. His grandmother was a chemist who developed the first patents. His mother grew the company while his father drank. Women built the empire he claims as his own masculine triumph." "Objection," Cromwell said weakly. "That ring is marital property." "The ring predates the marriage by 40 years, Zola said quietly. "It's family property, and I'm family, whether Julian likes it or not." Judge Williams nodded. "The ring will be transferred to Ms. Adebayo. Continue, Lieutenant." "I'm done," Asher said. "Except for this. I'm gay. Have been my whole life. Julian suspected, I think, which is why he pushed so hard to make me date girls, to produce heirs. But I'm done hiding. My partner David is here with me. We're getting married next month. And if we have children through adoption or surrogacy, they'll never know Julian Hawthorne's name." The screen went dark for a moment. Then Asher reappeared with a young man beside him, handsome, kind-faced, his hand on Asher's shoulder in quiet support. "This is David," Asher said simply. "The first person who ever loved me for exactly who I am." "Thank you for your testimony, Lieutenant," Judge Williams said, her voice gentle, "and congratulations on your engagement." As the video link ended, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. The full scope of Julian's cruelty had been laid bare, not just the financial crimes, but the emotional carnage, the deliberate destruction of lives, the keeping of trophies from his victims' pain. "Your Honor," Gabriel stood, "the prosecution rests." "Does the defense have any response?" Cromwell stood slowly, looking defeated. "Your Honor, given the testimony and evidence presented, Mr. Hawthorne has authorized me to propose a settlement." "From his jail cell?" Judge Williams's voice was arctic. "How generous. What does he propose?" "Full admission of financial fraud, transfer of all assets to a trust for distribution in exchange for leniency in criminal sentencing." Zola stood abruptly. "No." All eyes turned to her. "No deals. No leniency. No mercy. He showed none. He gets none. He serves the full sentence for every crime. 25 to life for the fraud, additional time for the deaths his price-fixing caused. He dies in prison, or he dies knowing prison is waiting." "Ms. Adebayo," Judge Williams said carefully, "that's not entirely your decision." "Your Honor, I represent the victims of Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals in a class action suit filed this morning. 17 families who lost loved ones to his greed. They've all signed the same statement. No deals." She pulled out a stack of papers, each one a life lost, a family destroyed. "Margaret Chen's daughter wants him to know her mother's last words were an apology to her children for not being able to afford the medicine. Deshaun Williams's parents want him to know their son asked if he was dying because they were poor. Maria Santos's children want him to know they asked if Mommy went to heaven because Daddy couldn't make enough money." Her voice never wavered, but tears streamed down her face. "So no, Mr. Cromwell, no deals. He owns what he did. All of it. Every death, every tear, every moment of desperation he caused while he counted money built on my mother's blood. Judge Williams nodded slowly. Mr. Cromwell, please inform your client that this court recommends the maximum sentence for all charges. Furthermore, all assets of Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals and personal holdings of Julian Hawthorne are hereby frozen pending final distribution determination. Your Honor. Court is adjourned until tomorrow for final judgment. As the courtroom emptied, Folasade approached the plaintiff's table where Morgana sat, destroyed. Get up, Folasade said quietly. Morgana looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. What? Get up. You're pathetic, but you're not broken. I survived him. You can too. Get up. Morgana stood slowly, unsteadily. You're 57, Folasade continued. I was 25. You have education. I had nothing. You have connections. I had a sister and a baby. Stop wallowing and start rebuilding. It's what women do. Why are you helping me? I'm not. I'm refusing to let Julian claim another victim. You want to die in that penthouse, drowning in wine and self-pity. Fine, but you'll do it knowing you chose to let him win. Or you can choose what I chose, to build something from the ashes. She turned to leave, then paused. That yoga instructor, Dimitri, he came to my accounting firm last week, wanted to know about his son. He's been watching from afar for 22 years, too afraid of Julian to reach out. Maybe start there, with truth. It's more than Julian ever gave any of us. As Folasade walked away, Morgana stood straighter, something shifting in her eyes. A recognition that perhaps survival was possible, even after 22 years of slow drowning. Outside the courthouse, Zola stood on the steps, looking at the ring Asher had sent via courier. 4 generations of Hawthorne women, their legacy finally in the hands of the one Julian had deemed worthless. It's beautiful, Folasade said, joining her. It's evidence, Zola replied. Evidence that women built what he claimed. Evidence that we've always been the strength he feared. She slipped the ring onto her finger, the blue diamond catching the light like justice crystallized. Tomorrow, it ends, Folasade said. No, Mama, Zola corrected, looking at the ring that connected her to grandmothers she'd never know, to a legacy stolen but not destroyed. Tomorrow, we begin. Chapter 8. The Mother's Shadow. Folasade Adebayo had not stepped foot in a courtroom since her divorce 22 years ago, but she entered courtroom 7 like she owned it, wearing the blue dress that had become her armor, her head wrapped in a jewel that her mother had sent from Nigeria, royal blue with gold threads that caught the morning light like crown jewels. She hadn't told Zola she was coming. The moment her daughter saw her, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Zola, who had been arranging documents with surgical precision, froze. Their eyes met across 20 feet of marble and memory, and in that look was every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment that had led to this reckoning. Mama, Zola whispered, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of 22 years. Judge Williams, who had been reviewing notes, looked up. Ma'am, are you Folasade Adebayo, formerly Folasade Hawthorne? I'm here as an interested party and witness. Mrs. Adebayo, you weren't scheduled to testify. With respect, Your Honor, I've been testifying for 22 years. Every job I worked, every meal I skipped so my daughter could eat, every night I stayed awake studying for certifications while she slept. That was all testimony. Today, I'm just making it official. Gabriel Sterling stood quickly. Your Honor, we'd like to call Folasade Adebayo to the stand. Objection. Cromwell was on his feet. This is ambush tactics, Mr. Cromwell, Judge Williams interrupted. Your client ambushed this woman 22 years ago when he stole her inheritance while she was hemorrhaging. She can speak now. Mrs. Adebayo, please take the stand. As Folasade walked to the witness chair, she passed the defendant's table where Julian sat in his orange jumpsuit, shackled, his empire in ruins. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in over 2 decades. She had aged, yes, but beautifully. The desperate young woman he'd discarded had become something he'd never expected, formidable. Her accounting firm, built from nothing, now handled finances for half the domestic violence shelters in New York. Her daughter, the worthless girl, was about to graduate from Yale Law. The woman he'd tried to destroy had become everything he'd never thought a black woman could be: successful, powerful, and completely beyond his reach. "Mrs. Adebayo," Gabriel began after she was sworn in, "can you tell us about December 15th, 2002? Folasad's voice was steady, carrying a Nigerian accent that she'd stopped hiding years ago, the accent Julian had mocked, calling it unmarketable. "I had been in labor for 26 hours. Eclampsia set in. My blood pressure spiked so high that doctors thought I would stroke. I remember begging for Julian, begging for my husband to be there. The nurses kept saying he was coming." She paused, her eyes finding Julian. "He never came. Not when I was dying. Not when our daughter was born. Not when I hemorrhaged so badly they had to give me 4 transfusions. He was in the parking lot, on the phone with his lawyer, stealing my inheritance." "How did you find out about the theft?" "Not for 3 years. I was too busy surviving. 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, cashier at a grocery store by day, weekend catering. I thought the inheritance was tied up in international red tape. Julian had told me Nigerian bureaucracy would delay it for years." She laughed bitterly. "I believed him because I loved him, because when you love someone, you don't imagine they're capable of watching you almost die and thinking only of money." "When did you learn the truth?" "When Zola was 3, she was sick, pneumonia, no insurance. The hospital wanted $5,000 up front for treatment. I called the Nigerian embassy, desperate, asking about my father's estate. They told me it had been transferred years ago, the day I gave birth. What did you do?" "I confronted Julian, went to his office at Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals. Security threw me out, but not before I saw her, Morgana. 6 months pregnant, wearing jewelry worth more than I'd make in 10 years, sitting in what should have been my chair." From the gallery, Morgana shifted uncomfortably. "He had his lawyer threaten me," Folasade continued. "Said if I pursued the matter, he'd use his connections to have me deported, even though I was a citizen. Said he'd make sure I never worked anywhere decent again. Said he'd take Zola just to prove he could, then give her to foster care." "So you stayed quiet?" "I stayed strategic. I knew that one day opportunity would come. So I prepared. Got my accounting degree at night school. Started keeping records of everything. Every threat, every humiliation, every document I could find. And I raised my daughter to be everything Julian feared. Brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely unbreakable." "Tell us about raising Zola." For the first time, Folasade's voice softened. She was extraordinary from the beginning. Walking at 8 months, reading at 2, but it was her sense of justice that amazed me. At 4, she gave her lunch to a homeless man, then lectured me about income inequality. At 6, she organized her classmates to protest when the school tried to eliminate free lunch programs. She looked at Zola with pure pride. I never told her to hate her father. I didn't have to. She figured out on her own that any man who could abandon his child for being female wasn't worth hating. He was worth defeating. "Mrs. Adebayo, Julian's defense has suggested you poisoned your daughter against him." Folasade's laugh was sharp. "Poisoned?" Number Y armed her. I gave her education, dignity, and the absolute certainty that she was worth everything he said she wasn't. If that's poison to him, it's only because his entire life is built on the subjugation of women he deems inferior. "Tell us about the insurance policies." Folasade's face darkened. "I found out about those when Zola was 7. $1 million on each of us, taken out the day I gave birth. He was betting on us dying. When we survived, he was furious enough to document his disappointment in emails to his lawyer. She pulled out a printed email reading, "The bitch and her spawn survived. So much for easy money. Now I have to do this the hard way." The courtroom stirred with disgust. "Your Honor," Folasade said, looking directly at Judge Williams, "I need to say something about what this man took from me. Not just money, opportunity. My father was Ambassador Adebayo. He had connections throughout Africa, Europe, America. I was supposed to attend Harvard Law. I had been accepted before I met Julian." She turned to face him fully. "You didn't just steal my money, Julian. You stole my future. You stole the law career I'd dreamed of since I was 10. You stole the international human rights work I'd planned. You turned me from a future lawyer into a cleaning woman, and you enjoyed it. I know you enjoyed it because you had me followed, photographed, documented like some kind of trophy. How do you know about the photographs? Your son, Asher, sent them to me, every single one. You in your mansion, looking at pictures of me scrubbing toilets. Did it make you feel powerful? Did it make you feel like a man?" Julian's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Julian pushed him away, his face contorting with rage. "You were nothing," Julian suddenly exploded, standing despite his shackles. "A nobody African with delusions of grandeur. I made you relevant by marrying you. Mr. Hawthorne," Judge Williams banged her gavel, "you will control yourself or be held in contempt." But Folasade smiled, a beautiful, terrible smile. "There it is, the truth. You never saw me as human, just a thing to own, to discard when I produced the wrong genital configuration in our child. But here's what you never understood, Julian. Nigerian women are raised to be warriors. We smile, we accommodate, we survive. But we never forget, and we never forgive." She stood in the witness box, her presence filling the room. "You thought you broke me, but you just taught me how to rebuild from ashes. You thought you destroyed my daughter's future, but you just gave her the hunger to devour yours. You thought you won, Julian, but all you did was plant the seeds of your own destruction in the tears of the women you betrayed." "Mrs. Adebayo," Gabriel said gently, "is there anything else you'd like to add?" Folasade reached into her bag, pulling out a worn notebook. "This is my journal from those years. Every night, no matter how exhausted, I wrote to Zola. Letters for when she was older, for when she would ask why her father left. Would you like to hear one?" Judge Williams nodded. "Please." Folasade opened to a marked page, her voice steady but emotional. "December 15th, 2005, Zola's 3rd birthday. My dear daughter, today you asked why other children have daddies and you don't. I told you that some people aren't capable of love, only ownership. Your father wanted to own a son, not love a daughter. But here's what I need you to know. His absence is not your loss. It's his. Every day he doesn't see your brilliant smile, every milestone he misses, every moment of your extraordinary existence he ignores. That's his poverty, not yours. You are not fatherless. You are father-free. Free to become everything without the weight of his limitations. Free to soar without his gravity pulling you down. Happy birthday, my warrior princess. The world doesn't know it yet, but you're going to change everything." Tears were flowing freely in the gallery. Even Judge Williams wiped her eyes. "One more thing," Folasade said, her voice stronger now. "Julian, you should know that your pharmaceutical empire, the one built on my father's money, it's being investigated by the Nigerian government for illegally exporting minerals that were never yours to sell. They're seeking extradition. Even if you survive American prison, Nigerian prison is waiting, and they have a very different view of men who steal from ambassadors' daughters." Julian's face went white. His lawyers huddled, whispering frantically. "Furthermore," Folasade continued, "every woman you've ever been with has been contacted. The mistresses, the secretaries, the escorts, They're all part of a class action suit for sexual coercion and financial abuse. Turns out you have a pattern of targeting vulnerable women, promising them security, then discarding them when they age out of your preference. 23 women, Julian. 23 women ready to testify. Your Honor, Cromwell stood desperately. This is hearsay. It's fact. Zola stood, holding a thick folder. Filed this morning in federal court. Hawthorne v. 23, Jane Does. They're represented by Gloria Allred. She sends her regards, by the way. The courtroom door opened, and an assistant handed Gabriel a note. He read it, his eyes widening. Your Honor, I've just been informed that the FBI has uncovered additional crimes. Mr. Hawthorne has been running an illegal organ harvesting scheme through his pharmaceutical company, targeting African immigrants. The Nigerian connection wasn't just about minerals, it was about kidneys. The courtroom exploded. Julian lunged forward, held back by guards. Lies, he screamed. This is all lies. Actually, a new voice said from the gallery, it's all true. Everyone turned. Bradley Stevenson stood again, his face grey with shame. I helped set it up. The organ scheme. We targeted people who wouldn't be missed, wouldn't be believed. People like... He looked at Folasade. People like you were supposed to be, Mrs. Adebayo. Poor black foreign. Julian called them spare parts for real people. I can't live with it anymore. I'm turning state's evidence. Judge Williams had heard enough. Mr. Hawthorne, you are remanded to federal custody without bail pending additional charges. This divorce proceeding is concluded with summary judgment for the plaintiff. All assets are hereby transferred to a trust for victim restitution. As the guards dragged Julian away, he screamed at Folasade, You planned this! You and that bitch daughter! You planned this for years! Folasade stood tall, regal, untouchable. No, Julian. I didn't plan anything. I just raised a daughter who refused to let injustice stand. I raised a daughter who took the rage you gave her and forged it into a sword. I raised a daughter who became everything you feared, a black woman with power, intelligence, and absolutely no mercy for men who mistake cruelty for strength. As Julian was dragged out, still screaming, Folasade turned to Zola. I'm proud of you, my daughter, not for destroying him, that was inevitable, but for becoming yourself despite him, for turning pain into power, abandonment into achievement. Mother and daughter embraced in the middle of the courtroom, two women who had walked through hell and emerged as queens. Your Honor, Folasade said, turning back to Judge Williams, I have one request. Yes, Mrs. Adebayo? The Hawthorne name. I want it legally stripped from everything. The company, the buildings, the patents, everything built with my father's money should bear his name instead. The Adebayo Foundation, the Adebayo Medical Centers, let African children benefit from what was stolen from Africa. Judge Williams smiled. I'll make it so. As they left the courtroom, Folasade and Zola walked arm in arm, their heads high, their backs straight. Behind them, the Hawthorne empire crumbled, its foundation of theft and cruelty finally exposed. What now, Mama? Zola asked. Now? Now we build something better, something clean, something ours. They stepped into the sunlight, free at last from the shadow of the man who had tried to destroy them, not knowing he was only forging them into something unbreakable. Chapter 9. The Empire Falls. The FBI raid began at 4:47 a.m. across 17 locations. Zola stood in Brennan and Associates' war room, her Yale law diploma still in its bag. She'd walked straight from graduation to orchestrating Julian's destruction. Team Alpha breached the main servers, FBI Special Agent Patricia Chen reported. 23 years of records downloading. Team Beta found organ harvesting documentation, another voice crackled. Photos, medical records. They targeted undocumented immigrants from Nigeria, promising free medical care. Zola's grip tightened on her coffee cup. Even now, Julian's evil surprised her. We found the secret surgical suite, Agent Chen continued. Your intel was perfect, Ms. Adebayo. Gabriel Sterling whistled. Organ farm in Manhattan. On screen, Morgana was escorted out in handcuffs, minimal charges to ensure cooperation. Another feed showed the New Jersey house raid where they'd found Julian Jr., traumatized but safe. Nigerian authorities revoked Julian's visa, Agent Chen announced. All escape routes cut off. Thomas Cromwell burst in, face flushed. This is illegal. You orchestrated everything. I used the system legally, Zola replied calmly. The same system your client abused. You're not even a lawyer yet, but I will be next week. I don't need a law degree to report crimes to the FBI. This is revenge. This is justice. Your client killed 17 people through price fixing, ran organ harvesting, destroyed countless lives. They found the bribery list, Agent Chen announced excitedly. Every politician, FDA official, Judge Julian paid off, all documented. Her phone rang, Julian's voice raw with rage. You fucking bitch! You destroyed everything. You destroyed yourself. I held up a mirror. I'm your father. Number, you're a sperm donor. Folasade Adebayo is both my parents. When I get out, you're not getting out. Organ harvesting is 25 to life. We found all your hidden money, every account, every cryptocurrency wallet. It's all being liquidated for victim restitution. Another call. Zola, are you watching the news? Folasade asked. Every network covered the raids. Pharmaceutical giant falls on CNN. Organ harvesting horror on Fox. But NY1's victim interviews stopped her cold. Families telling stories of loved ones who died from rationed insulin. We thought it was greed, one father said through tears. We didn't know he was trying to kill poor people. The reporter continued. Investigation shows Julian Hawthorne specifically targeted low-income areas, believing thinning the herd would improve society, his own words. Judge Williams entered, unprecedented for a sitting judge. We're establishing a special tribunal. Julian Hawthorne will face crimes against humanity charges. International law, Cromwell protested weakly. The organ harvesting crossed borders. The UN is involved. They want Ms. Adebayo to testify at The Hague. The International Criminal Court, Zola asked. Your father will be the first pharmaceutical executive tried for crimes against humanity. Agent Chen's voice crackled. Found storage unit in Queens, full of trophies, photos of victims, medical records of insulin deaths, hundreds of them. He was proud of their deaths, Zola whispered. More correspondence with white supremacist groups. He funded their anti-immigration campaigns, called it protecting the gene pool. Even Cromwell looked sick. I'm withdrawing. This isn't law anymore. This is evil. Morgana entered in handcuffs. I want to testify. Everything, every crime, every horror. I want to tell it all. Why? Gabriel asked. For 22 years, I thought I lived a fairy tale. It was a horror story, and I was complicit. On screen, Julian was transported to court, past hundreds of silent witnesses holding photos of loved ones who'd died, medical bills they couldn't pay. For the first time, Julian Hawthorne looked afraid. I have one more piece of evidence, Zola said, producing a USB drive. Every email, every document Julian thought destroyed. Asher has been copying everything for years. Since I was 7 and learned what justice meant, Zola explained. Every night Mama came home with bleeding hands from cleaning chemicals while he lived in luxury, built on her father's money. That was when I planned this. As the room emptied, Zola remained watching the screens. The empire was dead. You brought down one of America's most powerful men, Gabriel said. He brought himself down the day he decided a daughter was worthless. I just made sure he fell where everyone could see it. A message from Asher. Thank you for freeing me too. You're the sister I should have had. Tomorrow would bring more work. But tonight, for the first time in 22 years, the Hawthorne name meant nothing, and the Adebayo name meant Everything. Chapter 10. The Daughter's Verdict. 6 months later, Courtroom 7 filled for Julian Hawthorne's final hearing. Not his criminal trial, but the asset distribution. Zola Adebayo, Esquire, sat at plaintiff's table wearing Julian's grandmother's blue diamond ring. She'd passed the bar with New York's highest score. The courtroom packed with victims, families, journalists. Folasade wore traditional Nigerian formal wear, announcing her heritage with pride. Beside her sat Morgana, 6 months sober. "This is final distribution of the Hawthorne estate," Judge Williams announced. "All assets seized for victim restitution." Zola presented their proposal. "The empire, built on 10 million stolen from my mother, now valued at 2.3 billion after liquidation." Her presentation outlined the distribution: 500 million to insulin price-fixing victims' families, 300 million for free clinics, 200 million to organ harvesting families, 100 million for the Folasade Adebayo Legal Foundation, 50 million each to Asher and Julian Jr., the remaining billion for the Ambassador Adebayo Institute for Global Health. "Your Honor," Julian's voice interrupted. He stood in shackles, barely recognizable after 6 months in federal prison. Grey hair, hollow cheeks, artificial polish stripped away. "I have the right to speak. That's my money." "You have no standing here," Judge Williams replied coldly. "I want to face my daughter." Zola stood, turning toward him. "Speak." "You destroyed me out of spite, because I didn't want you." "No, Julian, I destroyed you because you destroyed others. The 17 dead from price fixing, 43 organ harvesting victims, hundreds of bankrupted families. My mother. I'm not your daughter seeking revenge. I'm their representative seeking justice. I made you. Without you, I'm everything. You taught me strength through your cruelty, self-reliance through abandonment, justice through your hatred. You made me into your perfect enemy." "I should have killed you both when I had the chance," Julian snarled. The courtroom gasped. "Thank you for finally being honest," Zola said softly. "Your Honor, add that confession to attempted murder charges." As marshals dragged him out, Julian made one last desperate plea. "Folasade. Tell her she's going too far." Folasade stood with radiating dignity. "You left me bleeding, stole my inheritance, condemned our daughter as worthless. But Nigerian women are born from diamond earth. Pressure reveals our brilliance. You thought you were crushing coal. You were creating diamonds. My daughter hasn't gone too far. She's gone exactly as far as justice demands." Zola clicked her remote, showing enhanced security footage from St. Mary's Hospital, 2002. Julian's voice, clear. "I don't care if she dies. In fact, it would be easier. The baby too. I've got insurance policies. It's a girl. Worthless. Just make sure the 10 million transfer goes through." A nurse ran to the parking lot. "Mr. Hawthorne, your wife is coding." Julian's response, "Then let her code. I have business to handle." "Additional conspiracy to commit murder charges," Judge Williams ordered. "Take him away." Julian screamed, "You're just like me, Zola." "Brrr!" calculating exclamation mark. "No, Julian, you destroyed for greed, I destroyed for justice. You abandoned for convenience, I persevered for love. You built on theft, I built on truth. We share only DNA, and I wear it better." The gavel fell. All distributions approved. Outside the courthouse, Zola faced reporters. "Julian Hawthorne was never my father, just a biological contributor. Folasade Adebayo is my father and mother. I'm joining the prosecutor's office, specializing in financial crimes. There are more Julians out there who think wealth makes them untouchable." Asher appeared with his fiancée. "Thank you for showing me family is about choice, not blood." Morgana approached hesitantly. "Would you consider advising my foundation?" Folasade studied her. "Redemption isn't given, it's earned, day by day, choice by choice." That night in Folasad's brownstone, mother and daughter sat with photo albums of triumph. Zola's graduations, her swearing-in ceremony. "The best revenge," Folasade said, pouring palm wine, "is that he's alive to see it. He knows the worthless daughter brought down his empire." "To justice," Zola said. "To us," Folasade corrected. "To women who refuse to break." In federal prison, Julian sat in solitary confinement. On the wall, scratched words haunted him. "Even the worthless can be warriors." The scales of justice had finally balanced, held by the daughter he'd thrown away, the daughter who'd become everything he'd feared, everything he'd never be. The end. Epilogue, 5 years later. The Adebayo Institute for Global Health had provided free insulin to over 1 million patients worldwide. The Folasade Adebayo Legal Foundation had helped 3,000 women escape abusive relationships with full financial recovery. Zola Adebayo had become the youngest district attorney in New York history, with a perfect prosecution record against financial predators. Julian Hawthorne had died in prison, alone, unmourned, his name a cautionary tale taught in law schools about how justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a small frame on a successful businesswoman's desk, sat a photo from a hospital 27 years ago, a mother holding her newborn daughter, both of them survivors before the battle even began. Warriors before the war was declared, victorious before the enemy even knew he had lost.